All right, Brooklyn Maboy, welcome everyone. One of my friends on Facebook suggested that I should react to this video from Jeen Apologetics, who is a young Orthodox Christian, Eastern Orthodox Christian. And his claim is that the Orthodox Christian Church is the true continuity of the Scripture and that Judaism is not. And he makes a few statements that are outright false, and we can, and some that are pretty much just out of context. So we can go through these. I'm not going to go through the whole video, but I would like to respond a little bit to this video. I'm going to play the video at I think 1.5 speed just to get through it. So basically what I'll do when I'm recording this is I'll pause it. I'm going to go through the video, but if there's something that I don't think is relevant, I'll probably skip through that, kind of in time editing sort of thing. So let's go through this.
Apologetics. This is, of course, your host Gene. Today, we're going to talk about how Judaism changed from its ancient origins into the Judaism of today. So without further introduction, let's get straight to the topic. When we look at the Old Testament, there is a liturgical practice to Judaism, the Judaism practiced by Moses and all the prophets through to and including when Christ was born on the earth. This Judaism is the Judaism that we, as Christians, specifically as Orthodox Christians, claim to have continuity from. It is this Judaism that we mirror in our liturgy, in our prayer life, in our practice, in the design and the interior of our temples, our holy places, our Orthodox churches. And as well, we have Roman Catholics and other brands of Eastern Catholicism who also share a liturgical sacrifice, and that is how they perform the Mass, which is similar to our divine liturgy. Usually when we talk about Orthodoxy and Catholicism amongst people who are spiritual babes in the words of sanctuary, people may make the argument, whether they're Jews, Muslims, or people who are discerning either religion, that Christianity has added pagan elements like the Eucharist that are not found in Judaism today. And there's always an assumption, as I've said in previous videos, amongst people who make these arguments, that Judaism has never changed and that Christianity made drastic innovations. We're going to refute that point today. When we look at the Judaism.
So the one point that he's bringing up essentially is that because in traditional Christianity, Orthodoxy and Catholicism, and to a lesser extent some of the Protestant churches, have the Eucharist, and that is, according certainly to the Catholic and Orthodox viewpoint, a bloodless sacrifice. And since Judaism does not have the sacrificial system anymore, that Christianity is continuing the classical Judaism, that Judaism is not continuing because we no longer have sacrifices. And one of the points that he brought out was that all throughout the Bible there were sacrifices, but that is not true. There was the 70 years of the Babylonian exile in which no sacrifices were brought. So therefore, this claim that it was a drastic change to stop the animal sacrifice system and the incense and so forth, and that this was something that all throughout the Bible was practiced, that is not true, because we see, the question I often ask Christians who claim that a blood sacrifice is necessary for atonement, and so therefore their claim is that the sacrifice of their person that they claim to be the Messiah for them takes that place of that sacrifice. Well, it's not true. The question would be, how did Daniel achieve atonement? How did Mordecai achieve atonement? How did any of the figures during the Babylonian exile achieve atonement? Because there were no blood sacrifices during that time. Let's go a little bit further, and what I think I'll do is I'll actually pause the video, his video. I'll pause my video and listen a little bit to him and see which points we want to refute.
Of Moses on it. We see that in the books of Moses, known as the Torah,
I'm actually just going to continue.
That Moses and the Israelites create the tabernacle. Within the tabernacle, we have the Ark of the Covenant. I've already discussed this in my previous video, how there was iconography and imagery within the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle itself, and the temple of God. All of these are holy places where God himself physically manifested and dwelt there, and he allowed there to be imagery in a place where he is dwelling. Therefore, iconography and imagery done appropriately in a holy place. Abrahamic tradition, contrary to what Judaism and Islam believe today, and many brands of Protestant.
So what he's saying is that the iconoclasm of Judaism is problematic in his esteem because in the temple there were the pictures of the images, the icons of the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, and there were other images in the temple. We don't deny that. Of course that was there. But the question is, of course, when it came to the cherubim, that was directly commanded by God. And in a certain sense, actually what our teachers teach us is that the golden calf was an attempt to capture whatever the golden cherubim represent, because both the ox and the cherub are images of the divine chariot in Ezekiel. And yet it was a sin to make the golden calf simply because God did not command it. Also, we see in the book of Kings that Jeroboam, Yeravam ben Nevat, placed golden calves in the temples that he made, again, initially not for worship, but actually to serve the same purpose spiritually and psychically and so forth, and psychologically, and iconographically as the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. So, yes, it's true that there was what you might want to call iconography in the Holy Temple. But the main point is, and which we have actually in the Bible, is that you're not supposed to copy the things of the temple. For example, one thing that this young man is mentioning is the incense, which is a very prominent part of the Orthodox Christian liturgy, is the incense. It's very important to Orthodox Christians as well as to Catholics. I would say it's probably more prominent in Orthodoxy, slightly more prominent. I know Catholics who say they like to get their incense from the Orthodox because they have better stuff than the Catholics. But nonetheless, we have a very strong stated tradition that you're not supposed to make the same compound of the incense that was used in the temple for, I mean, it's in the Bible. It's in, I don't remember the exact verse, but it says, Shalol Ariach Bo, that Nikrasa, that it's a very severe sin of kares, of spiritual excision. If somebody creates the incense that was used in the temple, nonetheless, one point that he keeps bringing up is that they still have the sacrifice, though it be a bloodless sacrifice, and we do not have a sacrifice. But the truth of the matter is, certainly in Sephardic and Hasidic and many other Ashkenazic as well synagogues, the recitation of the sacrifices is part of our liturgy. Certainly the Musaf service serves in the place of the Musaf sacrifice, and that has a biblical origin. In the book of Hosea, it says that the offerings of your lips come in the place of bulls. And we would make an argument, all the more so, any other sacrifices. And in addition to, and not only that, but our afternoon prayer is called Mincha, which is one of the sacrifices. It's the meal sacrifice. And our sages teach that our liturgy comes in the place of the sacrifices, or at least corresponding to the sacrifices. So the claim that we do not have sacrifice in our liturgy is wrong. We read the passages from the Bible every day of the sacrifices And we have a belief that either the Archangel Michael, who is very important in the Orthodox Church, I know, or the prophet Elijah is in the heavenly Jerusalem offering sacrifices, and this is in the Talmud, that the Archangel Michael, Sar HaGadol, the great Prince Michael, is offering sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem, in the heavenly Jerusalem, which he's maligning that the Talmud changed this or that, but these are ideas that are present in our liturgical life and with biblical basis. Like we said, the prophet Hosea was the one who said in the Bible that the offerings of your lips come in the place of bulls. Skipped a little bit, but let's hear.
Leading up to Christ, all this extremely long history, and through the temple and through the tabernacle as well, we had a Levitical priesthood. So the brother of Moses, Aaron, leads the Levitical priesthood, the Aram of the priesthood, and these priests are the caretakers of the tabernacle and then later the temple. And only they are allowed to go into the place where God himself dwells, and they only go about once per year. So already we see that we have a sacrifice system, we see that we have a priesthood system, we see that we have a temple system, we see that we have imagery is allowed, and we see that God enters creation and physically manifests into a zone in the world. These are all ideas that are not found in Judaism today. All of these ideas are not found in Judaism today, and they have not been found in Judaism.
That's not true.
For a very, very long time. Why do I bring this up? I bring this up to refute the idea that it is Judaism who has stayed in one coherent linear movement, always being the same religion, and that we Christians showed up on the spot, stole their thunder, innovated, and added things that weren't there. But as I just proved,
I mean, the truth of the matter is, Judaism has changed. You know, no one can deny that Judaism has changed. You know, certainly, I don't think anyone could deny that Judaism has changed over time. But nonetheless, we have our Masorah. We have, just like the Orthodox and Catholic Christians have their apostolic succession, we have our Masoretic succession. So, and both of them have changed through time. But to say that Judaism is static, no, of course there's been changes. That everyone could agree. And when I'm saying that Judaism changed, we see in the Bible Judaism added new things. The holiday of Purim and various fast days were added in biblical times. But we believe, and we can point to Scripture to say, that this was a sanctioned addition because the book of Deuteronomy says not to deviate to the left or the right from that which is taught by the judges of the time. So that's an actual biblical mandate for rabbinical law, and so therefore the other changes, certainly, Hanukkah, which would be post-biblical from a Jewish perspective, but biblical from a Christian perspective. It's mentioned in the Christian Bible, both in books that Christians call the New Testament, and in the, of course, the deuterocanonical books that Catholics and Orthodox have in their Bibles. The books of Maccabees, several books of Maccabees. The Orthodox, I think, have 4 different books of Maccabees. So, what then are you saying that Judaism changed? Yes, it changed, and then the other changes that came later would include basically things that were there to serve to remember the temple. That this way we still have memory of things that would happen in the temple, with hopes that the temple will be rebuilt and that the sacrificial cult be restored. So it's not really that strange, any of that. Let's go a little bit more. And so these changes were sanctioned and they're of biblical origin.
Stole their thunder, innovated, and added things that weren't there. But as I just proved through the Old Testament, we're not even talking about the New Testament. In the Old Testament, we have the Levitical priesthood. So we have a priesthood, we have a temple, we have a sacrifice taking place in the temple. I forgot to add that we also have incense, as mentioned in the Old Testament and in Old Testament prophecies talking about the Gentile kingdoms having their incense as well. It's a prophecy that eventually Gentiles will be doing their own liturgy and that incense is allowed in their liturgy. It's a small bit in detail. We have the sacrifice system, we have the incense, we have the liturgy, which they don't have a liturgy like ours.
Yes,
we also have a priesthood, which they do not possess. And we have a place where God actually dwells, which they do
Now,
not.
this is the biggest mistake that he made. He said they have a priesthood and we don't. We certainly have a priesthood, and we have the original priesthood. We have the Aaronic priesthood, which at the end he admits that the Christian priesthood is not the same as the Levitical priesthood, but we still to this day have the Levitical priesthood. We have both priests and Levites preserved, their family bloodlines, and serving in them certain manners. Of course, they don't still offer the sacrifices, but the priests still bless the people, and the Levites wash the hands of the priests. This is part of our liturgy, which goes back to biblical times. And so, certainly, that's one area where we changed. We did not change. Where they changed and we did not change is that we, they adopted something similar, but not the same. It's interesting. A Catholic friend of mine, a coworker, he always says, "Oh, because we mentioned Jeroboam, and he said that the Protestants remind him of how Jeroboam just took anybody to be a priest." Well, that's kind of what Christianity did, Catholicism and Orthodoxy did. Not just anybody. Obviously, there's a path to get there, but that is, they're not the Aaronic priesthood, certainly not in the Catholic Church, because the priests in the Catholic Church don't have children in the Western Roman Catholic Church. They don't get married, so there can't be any hereditary priesthood. And in the Orthodox Church, it's not that common, as far as I know, for a priest's son to become a priest. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I know more often children of priests might take on some other church or ministry role, but not necessarily become priests. And the Orthodox priests that I know, they're surprised that rabbis' sons become rabbis. I remember a friend of mine who's an Orthodox priest, a coworker, and I told him that when the Visions of Rebbe was Nifter, and all of his sons became Rebbes. He was like, all of his sons became rabbis? He couldn't believe it, So, but that's a totally different aspect. That's different than what we're talking about, the priesthood. The Aaronic Levitical priesthood is purely hereditary and not necessarily any type of requirements to live up to that priesthood, other than living in accordance to some basic laws of purity and who one may marry. And if they follow those laws, then their son is born a priest in Judaism. And like I said, the priesthood is still to this day preserved, and certain aspects of the priesthood are still observed. It's true, the priests are not bringing animal sacrifices, but they are still blessing the people. This is probably the biggest error of this video, the claim that we don't have a priesthood anymore. Let's go a little bit further and then.
In fact, they don't believe that God can dwell anywhere in Judaism, which is strange, because if you read through the Old Testament, God is always dwelling places. He's always meeting the prophets in certain areas. He's appearing. We can get into the nature of these appearances. Does he take his full mighty form, or does he come into a smaller form? We can talk about that at length. No one said he always shows up as a flesh and blood man, but he does.
We do have the idea of the Shekhinah. I think the biggest difference, and even, to be honest, what he refers to is the Memra, is what Christians would call the Logos. We do believe that God is manifested in the Torah, but not in a co-equal sense. And that's, meaning the Christian Trinitarian view is co-equality and co-eternity. which we don't have. I'm pretty sure that we understand the Torah and even the Shekhinah to be created. I've heard people say that the Shekhinah is created, and we don't pray to the Shekhinah. We don't pray to the Torah. We don't worship the Shekhinah. We don't worship the Torah. We only worship the Creator. And so this idea of co-equality and co-eternity are the major theological differences. But the idea of a manifestation of godliness within the world, of holiness and godliness and God's presence and God's revelation, it within the world certainly exists even to this day in Judaism.
Appear in the world very, very clearly. And when rabbis go back and read the Torah and the Tanakh, they have to selectively read different parts of it and come up with their own interpretation, which ironically is what the Christians are doing, that we are adding a confirmation bias that we already believe in the Trinity, so we're just going to find the Trinity in the Old Testament. Well, they already believe that God cannot enter creation, so even when he does, they find a way around it in their theology.
It's not the idea at all. I mean, clearly the revelation at Sinai was God entering creation. Clearly the miracles of the Exodus was God entering creation. So these are definitely ideas that are within Judaism.
Anyway, that's an example of them not reading into their scripture properly. And yes, even if you take an Orthodox Jewish Bible and you translate that Hebrew perfectly into whatever language you're reading, in the plain text, God still does make vivid appearances on earth. And you have to read into it differently to go, oh, he can't enter creation, so clearly this must mean something else.
Well, the Bible clearly says, Tamuno L'Reisim, you did not see any image. That's in the Ten Commandments. After the Ten Commandments. Right after the Ten Commandments. So the actual image of God as he is in his essence, there is no image that's possible to be made. Do you want to speak of a manifestation of his will and so forth? Yes, but not of an image of he himself. There can be representations and within images archetypically, but not, certainly we see these in like Isaiah. He saw the Lord sitting on his throne. This was an archetype. This is how we understand it, at least how I taught to understand it. But let's go further.
You're just reading the plain text. He does, in fact, enter creation. So like I said, the Jews do not have any Levitical priesthood, and priesthood at all, no sacrifice, no incense, no liturgy, no imagery, nothing like that.
We do have a Levitical priesthood. No, we don't have so much imagery, but there is to a certain extent imagery. People do have pictures of rabbis, people, even similar to the iconography of the Orthodox, people who use, a picture of Rabbi Shaila of Karastir to keep away mice. This is Segula. And the iconography of the Baba Sali and other tzaddikim, and certainly Lubavitchers always have pictures of the Lubavitcher Rebbe everywhere. So to say that there's the we totally eschew iconography, maybe we might, great rabbis might say it's wrong, but it's still nonetheless at least part of the folk practice of Judaism today, which is much of what Orthodox Christianity also has a lot of folk practices. And I don't think we have to put anybody else down. I don't have to, I think this video is long enough. It's almost longer than the video that we're commenting on at this point. So, but we've refuted some major points that he's made. The other things that he claims is that the Talmud is read every day and the Torah is only read once a week, but he admits that might not be exactly true. There's no liturgical reading of the Talmud other than liturgically reading the passages of the sacrifices to take the place of sacrifices. And in the same sense, there are readings from the Torah in every liturgy, or at least from the scripture, from the Psalms and so forth. But the liturgical chanting of the Torah from a scroll is done 3 times a week and sometimes more. Say it's only done once a week. But when he's talking about, probably making a reference to the Daf Yomi, that's not a liturgical reading, that's a study. It's a different thing, and people study the Torah every day just the same. We recite Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum and so forth, that we read the scripture twice and the Targum Aramaic once from Onkelos and so forth. So he's making a lot of errors here, I'd rather extend an olive branch and not be fighting, but so we're about 6 minutes in. Maybe we'll make more videos reacting to this, but it's just I just hope we can live in peace one with another and not always have to be saying the other one's wrong, because we could live together in a peaceful coexistence in this world, and we don't always have to be putting the other people down. All right, God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later. All right, how do I turn this off?